We are back with the Superflexology Start Sit series. Welcome to week 6. I am your host, John Bauer. You can find me on Twitter at the Bauer Club. Tonight, I am joined by Mitch Sorensen. That's at DynoMC on Twitter. What's going on, Mitch?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
We also have Jordan Lindsay. That's at Jailbreak Screen on Twitter.
Hey, glad to be back.
And Dan, the man with a plan, Lamagna, and that's at LC_Dean. What's going on, Dan?
What's up, gentlemen? 5 weeks overdue to win that Millie Maker. Let's go.
We still have some time. Don't panic. So rolling through a very quick scoring recap. Over the last 4 weeks, the consensus start-sit information, as a team, we were 10-9-3. And guys, last week we were plagued by injuries. We had 2 situations where I thought we were going to do okay, and injuries, well, it didn't really pan out. Sammy Watkins and Wayne Gallman both going down, not really helping out our takes. But looking at the scoring for the season, Mitch, a commanding lead with 16 correct answers, Dan with 13, Jordan with 12, and myself, again, I'm getting comfortable back here, bringing up the rear with 11. So before we jump into tonight's situations, and Dan, I appreciate your cooperation here. I knew I threw you a curveball, but we're going to change the format up a little bit here. Instead of going through very specific start-sit questions, we're going to be looking at the Fantasy Pros weekly consensus rankings and using that as our barometer. So we're each going to be choosing one guy that we're going to start and one guy that we're going to sit. So for example, Chris Carson, he's running back 8 this week according to the Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. If I say that he's a sit this week and he comes in at least 4 spots below that running back 8 mark, I'm going to give myself credit for a point there. So any decision that we have here, any person that we throw out there, it's going to be based on those Fantasy Pros consensus weekly rankings. With that said, Dan, let's start with you. Who is your week 6 start?
I appreciate you letting me go first tonight. You know, as we always do, we don't know each other's picks. You know, we kind of throw a couple of hints during the day. And I appreciate you letting me go first because I'm hoping to just destroy this whole new format and tilt everybody on the show. Having listened to John and Mitch for I don't know how many months now, my start of the week is Damian Williams. Okay, it's silent. No one's yelling at me yet, so maybe I'm not tilting the show. I'm not sure. But Damian Williams, Fantasy Pros has him ranked 23rd overall. Last week in my FF statistics rankings, I had him ranked 15th. Barely missed a receiving touchdown last week. But in watching that game, you know, he had 9 carries. He had 5 receptions. He's getting more involved. LaShawn McCoy had 0 carries and only 2 receptions. I think they're going back to Damian Williams. And I'm drinking the Kool-Aid that you guys have been pumping me all off season, all in season. I think he's returning. I'm moving him up in my rankings, and I think he potentially, in this shootout versus Houston, Kansas City's projected almost 30 points by Vegas, guys. Conviction here. I believe what I see. I think game theory is in his favor. I'm going with Damian Williams as my start of the week.
All right, well, before I pass this over to Jordan and Mitch, Dan, I think you read my show notes here because I also had Damian Williams. Coming in at running back 23, according to those rankings, he needs just around 13 points to hit that mark. And last week, with my lock of the week in Devontae Freeman, I picked on that Houston Texans defense. And I said going into that game, they gave up just over 30 receptions to running backs. They gave up 11 receptions last week to Ito Smith and Devontae Freeman. They're going to look to get the running game more involved this week after that loss to the Colts last week. And Damian Williams, he's hit over 50% of the snaps in every game that he's played. And you look at the usage, and you talked about it already, Dan. Damian Williams, he had 12 touches last week compared to the 2 combined touches for Darrell Williams and LaShawn McCoy. And in a game with the highest over-under this week, I think Damian Williams is a smash play at running back 23. And I actually have him on a few of my season-long leagues and my dynasty teams. And while I didn't play him last week, I made sure, while we still have time before this week really kicks off, I made sure that I got him in my lineups. And I don't know if we're going to see a ton of usage out of the running game, but it's those receptions that this Texans defense gives up that really has me intrigued. And I was really surprised to see him all the way down there at running back 23.
You and I have had some similar running back taste this year. I've noticed that. And I just think in yards alone, total yards, he's going to get those 13 points, John, and then have upside potential of, you know, the receptions, touchdown equity, and just hearing Andy Reid a little bit this week, you know, he's just saying he's the best, I think, pass blocker. You know, I think McCoy's having a little trouble adjusting to the system there. McCoy also fumbled last week. So we're riding together for sure.
Exactly. I think that fumble put McCoy in the doghouse just a little bit because if you look at the snap percentages, I think he was under 25% last week. And with this game being the shootout, I also have slight concerns with that offensive line. And we kind of saw it last week. Mahomes, the Colts were getting to him, and they were getting to him often. There was a lot of pressure, and I know he was having the ankle issues. He wasn't able to move as well as he normally does. But if that same thing happens here against the Texans, it's dump-off city. So, yeah, we could go on about Damian Williams all night probably. And, Mitch, I'm sure you would even jump in here. But who's your guy? Hopefully it's not Damian Williams.
It's not. No, I'm actually going to go with James Conner. Since Jalen Samuels is going to be out this week, James Conner is going to go back to that really bell cow role that he had last year. I don't think Benny Snell's going to get that much work. And normally we talk about the Chargers being a really good defense, but they're 25th this year in DVOA overall, and they're 25th in rushing as well. And I just don't think it's a matchup we need to be scared of at all, even with the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback situation. He's ranked 15th right now, and I think he should easily be a top 10 back this week just based off workload alone. And I'm going to have him in every league that I can. I'm actually going to go out and try to buy him a little bit, just knowing for these next 4 weeks, you're going to get all that work with him. Yeah, and even in Dynasty, and again, we talked about this so many times, while Dynasty is so long-term, the short-term outcomes play such an important role in values, and you could probably get James Conner at a slight discount right now, just because there are concerns with the passing game and that offensive line, that if he's able to smash over the next 4 weeks, you might be able to sell him then at a nice little premium. And you said he was, running back 15 on the rankings this week? Yeah, he's 15. Unfortunately, I think you're going to pick up a point on this one because I like that one. I'm actually very surprised to see he's that low with Jalen Samuels missing, up to a month. So yeah, I like that one. Jordan, what are your thoughts here? Who's a guy that you have going ahead of the consensus rankings here?
Well, I just want to say, first of all, I love both of those. And you guys know I don't like Damian Williams.
I was going to say, did I just hear that right? Because I know you don't like Damian.
Yeah, no, I mean, the couple of teams I have him on, I'm playing him for sure. I'm ready. I'm hoping for it. James Conner, absolutely. That's another great one. But before I get into my actual one, tomorrow night, James White, I think, is going to have a huge night with the 40-mile-an-hour winds and, not great weather. I think he's going to be great. So, I mean, if you are considering playing him, definitely play him, not in your flex since it's Thursday. But my actual start is, this is going to be make it or break it for me as far as redrafting him starting in my lineup. That's going to be Curtis Samuel. He's been really, really disappointing. He's like wide receiver 47 on the year, I believe, in PPR. Switch to Kyle Allen hasn't been great. Not that Cam was hitting him on his deep targets. He is getting a lot of air yard targets, but they're just not connecting. So, I mean, against this Tampa Bay secondary, this is going to be it for me. If he can produce, then great. But if he doesn't, then I'm going to be very, very cautious about starting him the rest of the year.
Where was he coming in on the consensus rankings this week?
He's at wide receiver 30. So 30. I mean, okay. Yeah. So I mean, if he has the Curtis Samuel kind of day, he could easily blow that away.
Okay. So it's nice to see a wide receiver thrown into the mix there. So the starts of the week: Damian Williams, James Conner, Curtis Samuel, all guys that we see finishing, we're saying, at least 4 spots ahead of where they're currently ranked on the Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. Now let's flip the switch here. Let's talk about the sets. Mitch, let's start with you on this one. Who's a guy that you see coming in? And again, the threshold we're picking is 4 spots below their actual consensus ranking right now.
I'm going to go with Todd Gurley. They're playing San Francisco this week, and San Francisco has the second best defense in the league next to the Patriots.
What is he ranked right now?
Right now, he's 13th. I don't even think we can really count the Patriots defense because they haven't played anybody yet. At least San Francisco has played some good teams and completely shut them down. But Todd Gurley hasn't gone over 70 scrimmage yards in the last 3 games. He's gotten 4 touchdowns the last 2, which is really good. But I don't think he's going to be able to get that opportunity this week against San Francisco. So he's going to be a sit for me this week, as much as I hate to say it.
If he doesn't find the end zone, I really could see him coming in under 10 fantasy points. And when we transition to the DFS stuff later in the show, I didn't pick him, but he was actually one of the guys that I was going to have as my over $6,000 fade. But I'm really glad that you did bring him up.
John, real quick, if I could interrupt here.
Dan, you can always interrupt me.
You're the best, man. You're the best. I just want to add to Mitch's theory there. With Gurley, he was on the injury report today with, I think, a quad injury. So he didn't even practice. So now you add that to Mitch's analysis, and that pick is looking solid.
That's a really good point, looking at the injury report and things popping up. So that's definitely something to monitor going into week 6. So, Jordan, who do you have as your sit?
My sit for the week this week is going to be Jordan Howard, actually. I think this game is going to be played through the air for the most part. I think Kirk Cousins is going to want to throw the ball a lot, get Diggs and Thielen involved, thus make Carson Wentz have to throw the ball as well. So I like all the pass catchers in that game, and Miles Sanders, but Jordan Howard at running back 27 in PPR, I think he could, fall well past that.
I like that take. And when we get to the DFS stuff later on in the show, I'm going to be bringing this game up because I do agree with you. I think that game is going to be – now, I've knocked Kirk Cousins several times this season, but I do think in general, Cousins and then Wentz, they're going to be forced to throw the ball because both of these defenses up front, they are tough. And I think Jordan Howard's going to have some issues against that Vikings defense. Dan, what are your thoughts here? Who's your sit?
Sit of the week, my friend. Just give me my point now. Just seriously, just chalk it up, put it in there, count it now. Lock of the week. Do not start this guy. I guess piggybacking off of Damian Williams to start, we are sitting LaShawn McCoy. Fantasy pros, there must be LaShawn McCoy truthers over there because they have him ranked 24th. If you go back to my rankings on FF Statistics last week, I had McCoy 41st, and he's even worse this week.
I was going to say he didn't even hit 41st last week.
So I don't think he's going to even sniff that 24th ranking that Fantasy Pros has there.
No.
He struggles in pass protection, 0 rushing attempts last week. So any of our listeners out there that are thinking about him, stop thinking about him, bench him.
I know we've seen some flashes from McCoy this season in the limited opportunities he's had, but just like we talked about with Damian Williams, when Damian is healthy and he's active, he's taking a lot of those snaps and a lot of those overall touches in that backfield. When I saw LaShawn McCoy at 24, especially in PPR, Dan, that one really jumped off the page. So I'm glad that you did bring him up. And for me, my sit, I struggled with this because I bounced back and forth between a few guys. And as you guys know, I always go into a show with 1,000 different players and 1,000 different takes. But for me, it was Josh Gordon. Coming in at wide receiver 15 in PPR, according to the Fantasy Pros rankings, that's going to take 17 to 20 fantasy points. And I can't see this game being remotely close. The Giants, Barkley, Evan Engram, Sterling Shepard. I don't know if that offense is going to finish the first half with positive yards. I really don't. And I love Daniel Jones. It's just this game is going to be a bloodbath. I really think that in a short week, also, while the Patriots, I think they get off to an early lead and that defense really pressures that Giants offense. The Patriots on offense, they might be a little bit off. So I think it's going to be a big Michelle game. Jordan, you talked about James White. I like that take as well. And again, I think it's going to be a Julian Edelman game. Josh Gordon, I can't see it. Like I said, it's going to take 17 to 20 fantasy points to hit that wide receiver 15 number. I can't see it. Now, I do have him starting in a few leagues over guys like Robbie Anderson, Peyton Barber, Deontay Johnson. In those leagues, obviously, they're a little bit deeper, so you got to dig a little bit. So those are situations where I'm starting Josh Gordon. But if you are going to play him, temper your expectations. I think he finishes in that wide receiver 3 range, but wide receiver 15, a little too high for me. Those are some guys to keep your eyes on. If you were thinking about playing them or if they're right on the bubble of that starting roster spot, especially, Todd Gurley, like Mitch mentioned, keep an eye on the injury reports as the week progresses because there's going to be a lot of important things that pop up from time to time. So transitioning to the DFS stuff, this was a good week for us last week, guys. And looking at the list, our over $6,000 fades, Zeke, Le'Veon Bell, Alvin Kamara, all great guys to fade last week because they didn't really have the return that you needed based on their price. Under $6,000 must-haves, my lock of the week, Devontae Freeman, he came in over 3 times the return. Sutton, Allen Robinson, great options that you guys threw at the listeners. Carlos Hyde, he just missed it. And then our below $4,000 dart throws, Auden Tate, he had the necessary return. And then Anthony Miller. Dan, I got to ask you, is Anthony Miller in your doghouse now?
He was going to be until I got the late news. I wish I had this news before I made the pick. The Bears decide not to travel to London until Friday. He was jet lagged. The whole Bears offense was jet lagged for a first half. And then the second half, he looked good. So I truly believe if it wasn't for that slow start, he could have came through. So I'm hanging on a little longer, John.
All right, well, I'm going to request that any NFL team traveling to London, please provide Dan with your flight schedule so he can make his picks accordingly.
No word of lie. I am watching that Carolina-Tampa Bay game, 9:30 a.m. in London. So listeners, make sure your lineups are set. It's an early morning game on Sunday. I want to see when they're traveling.
Let's go.
Adjust accordingly.
We're getting off track here, but that's all right. I typically am not a huge fan of the London games, but that should be an interesting game just because there's so many fantasy relevant guys playing in that early game.
It's that much earlier, I could do nothing. So 9:30, perfect.
All right, so let's get to the DFS stuff. And Jordan, we're going to start with you. As always, we start with our over $6,000 fades. Who are you telling our listeners to avoid in DFS this weekend?
It's going to be Leonard Fournette at 6,700. New Orleans is pretty good against the run, but they are susceptible to providing a little bit of a funnel through the air. So I do like DJ Chark this week. I don't love Fournette. I know he's been getting great volume, but at 6,700, I don't think you're going to come close to that this week.
All right, I have to bounce this one over to Mitch. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know you are a massive Leonard Fournette truther over there.
I do. He just gets so much work that he's someone that I'm kind of scared to fade each week. But if he doesn't get a touchdown, then he's not going to pay off.
Right. Even if he pops off for the yardage based on the carries he's going to get, he's not going to get a return. And Jordan, what did you say his price was?
6,700.
Yeah, and I think that may be a little too much. In redraft, season-long leagues, you're not going to sit him, but I think that's a good play here, or should I say a good fade for over $6,000. Mitch, who do you have for the listeners?
I have Nick Chubb. Really, because any chance I could have to pick against the Browns offense, I'm going to do it.
I don't know why you hate them so much.
They're just overrated, and there's no reason why he should be 7,300. He's only had one game over 20 points so far this season, and that was that blow-up game against the Ravens. And he only has one game over 100 rushing yards as well. Even though Seattle is an average team against the run, I just don't see him putting up the pretty much 23 points that you need with him. He's going to have to top 100 yards and get you a touchdown. With that offense, I just don't see it happening. So I'm definitely not going to have Nick Chubb.
I know all offseason you were anti-Baker, so you're probably loving what you've seen through 5 weeks. But you mentioned kind of a stat line for Chubb that we're going to have to see for him to have a good return. What do you see as a realistic stat line here in week 6 for him?
I'm pretty sure he's still going to get his 20 rushes, but I'm very sure it's going to be under 100 yards, and he'll probably pick up a touchdown. So I see him closer to the 19-point range. And at 7,300, I want someone that's going to get me 25, 26 points. He'll probably get you a couple catches, but he's just not getting the yardage off that either.
Right. Okay. And then, Jordan, real quick, back to you on Leonard Fournette. What did you see as a realistic stat line? I meant to ask you whenever you brought him up.
Let's just spit out 21 rushes for 87 yards and 2 catches for 19 yards.
Okay, so
no touchdowns.
I was going to say, with that stat line, definitely not enough to return on the investment. And then before I throw my fade, which I think it's gonna scare some people, but I think it's a lock this week. Dan, who do you have?
You're teasing us, Jared John. I'm looking forward to that. And I always enjoy the analysis of the rest of the crew here. I give one counter to Jordan's point on DJ Chark, because I'm definitely on the train there. I could see him getting shadowed by Marshawn Lattimore this week, who in the previous 2 weeks shut down Mike Evans, shut down Amari Cooper, who are both having excellent years. I could see him shadowing Chark and making it a DD game instead. So just a little something to think about there as we look at receivers this week.
I was just going to ask you, do you see this as a DD game before we get to your pick?
Yeah, DD's he's kind of been hot and cold this year. I think everyone's disappointed because he's underachieved based on preseason expectations, and Sharks just taking the league by storm. But I still believe they have a good 1-2 punch there. And I think Lattimore will take out Shark, and I think that sets up nicely for Dede. So he's definitely a DFS sleeper this week.
Now, who's your over $6,000 fade?
Over $6,000 fade. I've had a little history of doing this. I'm starting at the top or near the top again, and I'm going to fade Dalvin Cook. And listeners, don't hate me on this one here. You definitely have to hear me out because I love Dalvin Cook. I think he's one of the best players in DFS and the NFL this year. But if I'm looking for a GPP play, I just don't like this matchup versus the Eagles. And to spend up for 8,400, I see a Dalvin Cook week 4 versus the Bears all over again. So when you're looking for a stat line, John, when he played the Bears that week, he had 14 carries for 35 yards, 6 catches for 30 95 yards. And I think it's going to be similar. He'll probably find that one of the Vikings projected 3 touchdowns. I could see him scoring around 18, 20 points. In redraft, you start him. But in DFS, I'd rather pay up 100 for Zeke, who's playing the Sisters of the Poor in the New York Jets, or, save a little money and take Alvin Kamara at 8,000, or save a lot of money. We're talking about Damon Williams at 5,700. So my fade, I'm sitting Dalvin Cook in DFS.
All right. Once again, I'm convinced that you somehow hacked my computer. I also have Dalvin Cook. And it's funny, my stat line that I have written down here, 10 carries, 40 yards, 5 receptions for 50 yards, and 1 touchdown, puts him at 20 points. And you said, 18 to 20 points. So we're seeing eye to eye on that one, Dan. The thing that worries me with Philadelphia, they don't give up a lot of explosive plays. So if you look at the running game, and this includes quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs, the Philadelphia Eagles have only given up 8 plays over 10 yards in the running game. As a frame of reference, the Patriots are at 6, Bears are at 7. So the Eagles are right there. Now, they do tend to give up some receptions. We've seen it with Le'Veon Bell, Chris Thompson, Aaron Jones, but none of them really exceeded in the yard department. So I think the 5 receptions for 50 yards, that could be right on par. But again, coming in at 20 points for $8,400 at running back 2, that's a strong fade for me. And Mitch, just like you said, we're looking for at least 25 points from these really high cost guys. 20 points isn't going to do it. I'd rather save some money and get those points elsewhere. Moving on here, the under $6,000 plays. Mitch, let's start with you. And I think you were kind of excited about this one when we were talking earlier.
A little bit, yeah. So this is going off what Jordan said earlier about Curtis Samuel, but I want DJ Moore. He's only 5,300. He only needs 16 points to pay off, and Tampa Bay is the best team in the league against the run. They shut everybody down, and they've played the elite of the elite back so far, and they're a bottom 10 team against the pass. The last game he played, he had 9 catches and 14 targets, and I think it's going to be a repeat this week. Going to easily be over 8 targets. He's going to break 100 yards and get a score. So if I had to actually put out a stat line, I think 8 catches for 115 and a touchdown's pretty easy, which would give him about 25, 26 points and absolutely smash that 5,300 price point.
I know heading into week 5, we brought up DJ Moore, and there was a concern from all 4 of us in a start-sit question because of the lack of targets from Kyle Allen. I think it was, 7 targets over the 2 games leading up to week 5. And it seemed like Kyle Allen, he overcorrected it. And we saw a ton of targets last week. And I agree with you. I think there's a chance that we see a repeat in that area. So I think DJ Moore, he has quite an opportunity here this week. Dan, over to you. Under $6,000 play.
Mitch is making this not fun for me because he's taking guys I like rooting for, and I'm trying to catch him in this league. DJ Moore, James Conner. Thanks, Mitch. But no, my under 6K play this week is, I guess I'll stay on the Mitch theme here, is in Dynasty. We know Mitch has mortgaged the farm for this guy. And then this is the week, Mitch, I think you're going to get some of your return on investment with Duke Johnson. I'm going way down there to 4,100. You want some value savings in your roster in this explosive Kansas City-Houston game, which, Kansas City's the home favorite. So that's a passing script favoring Duke Johnson. And he's looking good. All right. 6 to 9 carries, 50 plus yards, I believe a week is what he's averaging. 3 targets. I see all that going up. He's making people miss. He's looking really good. I predict, John, a total of 100 yards, 4 receptions and a touchdown. 20 points at 4,100. That's enough to have me sold.
And again, this is the game to do it. I think it has the highest over-under this week. And it's funny that you brought up Duke Johnson because I saw a very interesting tweet. And it was Duke Johnson. He's number 1 in yards after contact, number 1 in PFF's elusive rating metric, number 2 in yards per touch, number 3 in yards per carry. And I know we brought up Carlos Hyde last week and how he's done some good things this season, but you got to think they get this guy more involved. Duke Johnson, he's a valuable weapon on that offense. And you have to think they use him more, especially in a game that we project to be very high scoring. So I like that. Not quite at the $4,000 marker, so you're able to play him here, but that's a good pick. I like it. And Jordan, who do you have under $6,000?
This was kind of easy. It was Michael Gallup. The Jets secondary, the whole team actually is just awful. But, Sammy Darnold's back, which means, theoretically speaking, the Jets should score more points, which means Dak's going to have to keep up as well. I think it's going to be a great day for the Cowboys all around, Cooper. But, whenever Gallup's on the field, man, he is great. So I think he's around 5,700 or so. So I'm definitely going to have him in my lineups.
I like that one, and he's been explosive when he's on the field. He's making the most of his opportunities. Dan, I know you get excited seeing both of those guys, Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup, on the field. And yeah, Sam Darnold's back for the Jets. You have to think that offense is a little bit improved. And I say a little bit, it should be much improved with him at the helm. And I think at that price, he should return at least 3 times the value. I saw a lot of people out there. The buzz is strong with Michael Gallup this week. So, Jordan, I think a lot of people are on board with you there. And my guy, my absolute stone cold lock this week. I've been trying to pick him up at reasonable prices in Dynasty, especially some of the deeper leagues where bye weeks hit me hard this week. And Mitch, you and I talked about this guy as a buy for contenders in Dynasty. That's Mohamed Sanu. Wide receiver 37, $4,500, going against the anything but stingy Arizona defense. The Falcons can't stop anybody either. They have to throw the ball. 44 pass attempts per game. Matt Ryan, a quarterback that I love coming into the season, has targeted Mohamed Sanu at least, I think it was 5 times every single game. A realistic stat line for him this week: 5 catches, 55 yards, and a touchdown at least. And that's going to get you 16.5 points, enough to return on the $4,500. What are your guys' thoughts? Anything else before we move to the under $4,000 plays here?
No, I think those are all great, actually. And another one I want to throw in there is Matt Breida. We saw what he did the other day, but I think he is definitely under the $5,700 range. Yeah, $5,100. So I think he's a great play as well.
Now, is that a formal pick by you, Jordan? Is that going to be
included? No, that is not the formal pick. It's just a bonus nugget.
All right, so that will
We're sticking with Gallup. We're going to stick with Dan's man Gallup.
All right, so that can neither hurt us nor help us. So, okay, so fantastic plays there, under $6,000. But now, as we always say, let's get the shovel out. Let's dig a little bit deeper, under $4,000. And Jordan, let's start with you here. And I'm going to be honest, before we move on, before we get into it, guys, I had a lot of trouble on this one, and I had to search because I hated a lot of the guys that were under 4,000, but I did find one, and I think, Mitch, you're going to steal it from me. But Jordan, let's start with you. Who's a guy that you like here?
You know, this one was hard. I'm with you there, but when I found one, I'm with this one completely. It's going to be Trey Quinn for the Redskins at $3,700 against the Dolphins. First 3 weeks of the season, he had 6 targets, 7 targets, 7 targets. With Case Keenum playing quarterback. Case should be back this weekend. Whole offense should be improved through the air, possibly on the ground as well. But I love Trey Quinn at $3,700.
I know these are dart throws, and I don't even really feel great about the guy that I have. My only concern with Trey Quinn, while he's dirt cheap, Bill Callahan's coming in saying they have to establish the run. I think he had a quote, and I'm paraphrasing. He said that if they run the ball more than their opponent, they will win the game, which obviously in today's NFL might be a little counterintuitive. But I think this is an Adrian Peterson spot. But yeah, that price for Trey Quinn, if he's able to find the end zone, he's going to pay off. It just worries me that he's not going to find it. And I could easily see maybe a 4 for 40 game. But if you had that touchdown in there, perfect play there at $3,700. So yeah, I think there's some upside there, Jordan. Dan, who do you have under $4,000?
Yeah, I will say, to add to that Trey Quinn, when they're playing the Dolphins, you play everyone versus the Dolphins, even the terrible Redskins. So that'll be an interesting one to watch.
That's been your motto all year.
Under 4K play, this is tough. I had to have a conversation with my general manager this week because I've really struggled. And this has, I think, been the difference between Mitch and I in the standings. So hopefully this is the week I could get it right. I almost feel like it's chalky for under 4K because there really wasn't many good guys there. I like Kiki Kuti. 3,500. Houston, Kansas City again. Play all the dudes. Last week he had 4 targets, 3 catches for 72 yards. That was 11 points. I could see him going upwards of 5 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown this week and getting 19 points. When the guy's played, he's produced. Hopefully Stills doesn't come back, but either way, lock and load Kiki Kuti for me.
Kiki's a guy that it really does just take one catch, and he's going to return on that price. With all of the question marks surrounding the guys under $4,000, Kiki's probably one of the better options, so I could definitely see the upside there. And Mitch, before we get to the pick that I'm not thrilled about myself, I'm hoping you steal him. Who do you have?
I'm not going to steal him. Sorry, Dan. I actually have Kiki as well. Knew it was going to happen, but I actually have him. It's funny, you said 5 for 80. I have him down for 5 for 75. But Fuller got 16 targets last game, and Hopkins got his normal, 8. So we see Hopkins getting a couple more, but I don't think there's any way Fuller is going to get another 16 targets. So as long as Kenny Stills is out again, and it looks like he's going to be, I think Kiki is a smash play in that game. So I'm going to have him in a ton of lineups. But the only issue is you don't really need anybody under 4,000 this week. So that's going to be kind of the decision to make this week, is if you want to go all the way down to Kiki, or if you just want to play a whole bunch of those running backs that are in the 6K range that should smash.
I was going to say the same thing. There's so many guys in the middle range that I absolutely love. And now it's not in any of the categories, but a guy that I love this week, obviously, is Matt Ryan. And he's at like 6,400, and they're going to throw the ball. Just a little tidbit there. And you guys might yell at me here because I don't know if I broke the rules, but my guy's actually $4,000 exactly. So maybe you'll let it slide. I don't know. But it's Jamison Crowder, and he's Sam Darnold's safety blanket. I hated the guys under 4,000, so I had to bend the rules a little bit. Realistic stat line: 7 catches, 60 yards, nothing fancy, but 13 points, at least 3 times the return. Saying Jamison Crowder out loud was actually the least nauseating for me to have to say. So that's my pick there. Hopefully you guys forgive me, even though he's coming in at 4,000.
Normally I'd say no, but you need all the help you could get. So I think we might have to give you this one, and maybe you could catch up by like a point this week.
It is kind of a cop-out, but it's fine.
Like Mitch said, I need all the help I can get at this point.
That's true. It's true.
Maybe I can start throwing in like the $6,000 guys into the $4,000 plays. And, in my head, I can just reduce their price so it comes out a little bit better for me. But yeah, I think all of those are great guys under 4,000 plays. They're dart throws, guys. You can make an educated decision, but they could pop for 20 some points and then they could fizzle for 2. So yeah, I feel great about the under 6,000 plays. And I think the fades are spot on. We have been very strong with the fades. We've been looking at these high price guys. A lot of them, just pay attention to the matchups and it's going to be there. I know that we pick on a lot of the running backs facing Philadelphia, but it sticks out like a sore thumb. So yeah, just pay attention when you're setting your lineups. And there's a lot of little things there that if you look at it, it should make sense. Before we sign off tonight, week 6, closing thoughts. This season, it's absolutely flying by. Dan, closing thoughts here. What do you have?
Just for our listeners, remember we're recording this show Wednesday night, so our studying is only halfway done. We've recapped last weekend. We've looked at free agents this week, looking at the schedule, looking at the salaries. We're still going to be following the injury reports, different analysis of, our colleagues throughout our profession, challenging each other's thoughts and plays, and then looking finally at ownership projections. So keep studying, keep following us, and good luck to everybody this week.
Dan, you mentioned that we're recording Wednesday night, and while that's true, when you guys are ready to start doing a live Sunday morning show, you let me know.
That's what do we call it? Tinkering time?
Yeah, absolutely. We could sit here live on the air. We could tinker. I'm sure I would change my lineups 1,000 times before kickoff. But
I'll be live from the tailgate, baby.
That's all right. Get the juices flowing. It'll be that much more entertaining. Jordan, what are your thoughts here? Closing thoughts.
Yeah, just stop tinkering. Go with your gut. I lost last week because I didn't play DJ Chark. It's just the way it is. I lost by 0.6 because of Robbie Gould. But it's just also get rid of kickers. If you still have kickers, get rid of kickers. There you go. That's my thought.
Can you tell my brother-in-law that, because that still has not happened? He hasn't caught up with the times here. But Mitch, what are your thoughts here? Closing thoughts for the listeners heading into week 6.
So the only thing I want to bring up is on that Monday night game, I didn't want to bring up Carry-On again, but I think Carry-On is an absolute smash. He's only 5,400, I believe, on DraftKings, but make sure he's in all of your lineups. Green Bay is still really bad defense against the run. They kind of lucked out because the Cowboys just stopped running it last week, even though they were doing really well with it. And I think Carry-On's going to put up another 25-point week, so definitely have him in your lineup.
Yeah, I know you had mentioned you didn't really want to come across as the homer and pick Carry-On every single week, but I agree with you. I think he's somebody that needs to be in lineups if you're doing the Thursday to Monday, or the Monday next Thursday, whatever the slate is that you're doing that includes that Monday game. I think Carry-On needs to be included. As always, thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Superflexology Start Sit series. Best of luck in week 6. Have a great night.